Mysterious Cabin in the Fog, a chilling tale from Germany. I had spent the weekend in a small, secluded village in Germany, far from the hustle and bustle of city life. The daily grind, the work, the constant connectivity, all of it felt distant and unreachable. As I arrived in this picturesque village, it was a place seemingly forgotten by time, where everyone knew the value of peace, and nature was a constant companion. With a backpack, a walking stick, and a clear idea of how I wanted to spend the day, I set off to explore the forest. The villagers had told me about the nearby trails that wound through dense woods and over rolling hills, and I was eager to immerse myself in nature. The forest welcomed me with open arms. The path was lined with tall trees, their branches arching overhead in a green canopy, as though to shelter me from the sun. It was early autumn, and the forest smelled of damp moss and weathered wood. The leaves on the trees hadn't yet fully fallen, and the golden and red hues of autumn made the woods seem like a living painting. I took a deep breath and savored the fresh, cool air. The forest was quiet, almost sacred in its stillness. Only the gentle rustling of the leaves and the occasional chirp of a bird broke the silence. I let my thoughts wander as I slowly made my way along the narrow trail. The walk was easy, almost idyllic. There was no rush, and I relished drifting along without a particular destination. I remembered the many hikes I'd taken in the past, and felt a sense of reconnection with nature. But the further I went, the more the atmosphere seemed to change. At first, I noticed that the forest had become eerily quiet. The birds had stopped singing, and the wind that had been rustling the leaves earlier had now ceased. A strange feeling crept over me, as though the forest itself was holding its breath. The sunlight, which had been streaming through the trees, began to weaken, as if it were hiding behind the dense canopy. The air grew noticeably colder. I pulled my scarf tighter around my neck and quickened my pace slightly to avoid feeling too uncomfortable. After a while, I noticed that the fog, which should have been settling in the valleys of the forest, was already surrounding me. At first, it was just a faint haze in the distance, barely noticeable. But then, almost imperceptibly, the fog began to creep closer. It started as a light mist that made the air damp and cool, but the further I walked, the thicker it became. The once clear path ahead was now becoming more obscured by the dense fog, and with each step, the chill in the air seemed to deepen. The forest, which had moments ago seemed so lively and open, was slowly transforming into an opaque, almost unsettling landscape. The fog was now so dense that I could only make out the few steps directly in front of me. The air had taken on a strange weight, as though the mist was hiding something, a presence that I couldn't quite name, but could certainly feel. A faint cracking of branches behind me made me flinch. I turned quickly, but the fog swallowed everything behind me. It felt as though the forest had become a different place, one where time and space no longer had any meaning. And then I saw it, a clearing, hidden behind towering fir trees. In its center stood a small cabin, old but not dilapidated. It seemed inviting. The shutters were intact, and a slightly crooked chimney jutted out from the roof. The door stood ajar, just slightly. I couldn't look away. It was as if the cabin was calling to me, an invisible pull urging me forward. The wood of the door felt smooth and cool as I pushed it open. The interior was perfectly preserved. No trace of dust, no sign of decay. It was as if time held no sway here. The furnishings were simple, yet charming. A round wooden table with turned legs stood in the center of the room, set with fine porcelain. The plates were delicately painted with blue floral patterns, and on a tray lay silver teaspoons, slightly tarnished. A bookshelf lined one wall, filled with books whose leather covers hinted at faded gilt edges. In one corner stood a large wardrobe made of dark oak, its doors slightly ajar. Curious, I stepped closer. Inside hung clothes from another era, long skirts trimmed with lace, men's jackets with worn elbows, and a hat with a faded ribbon. The fabrics smelled faintly of damp wood and an unfamiliar, unplaceable scent. A small dresser near the bed caught my eye. On it sat an old, yellowed picture frame, holding the portrait of a young woman. Her hair was tightly pinned up, and she wore a plain dress with a high collar. Her eyes seemed to follow me. Next to the picture frame lay a newspaper. The paper was brittle and stained, yet the text was still legible. "Forest clearing holds secrets," read a headline. Beneath it, an article. "The search for the missing young woman named Anna L. continues. She was last seen near the forest." Despite days of effort by the villagers, there is no trace of her. Witnesses speak of an eerie mist enveloping the woods. My heart began to race. The date printed at the top of the newspaper made me freeze. September 7th, 1893. Suddenly, I felt it again, that unsettling presence filling the room. The air seemed heavier, colder. Behind me, I heard a faint rustling, like fabric moving. When I turned around, she was there, the woman from the portrait. Her dress appeared even paler now, as though it had lost all color, and her eyes, they were empty, as if they could see nothing, or everything. She moved slowly, almost gliding, yet her steps seemed to touch the ground. I wanted to scream, but no sound escaped my lips. My legs felt paralyzed. She came closer, and with every step, the cold sank deeper into my bones. Somehow, I managed to break free from my paralysis, dashed to the door, and flung it open. But the fog outside was so dense, I could barely see the path. I ran, stumbling over roots, cutting myself on branches. But fear drove me onward. The cold seemed to follow me, and at times I thought I saw her figure in the mist, like a shadow that refused to let me go. When I finally reached the forest's edge, I collapsed, gasping for breath. The warm sun was shining again, and the mist had vanished. I vowed never to return to that place. The memory of the cold, the fog, and the woman haunted my dreams for days. It felt as though I had glimpsed something I was never meant to see, a place between times, between lives. But when I told my friend about the experience, he just laughed. "That sounds like a story from a bad horror film," he said. "You're not seriously telling me you're scared of some cabin, are you?" He wouldn't let it go. Eventually, he convinced me to go back with him and another companion to show them everything. I resisted, but part of me wanted to know whether the cabin truly existed, or if I had simply lost my mind. We returned the next afternoon, in broad daylight. When we reached the clearing, the cabin was almost unrecognizable, a ruin overgrown with moss and plants, its walls partially collapsed, the once pristine windows shattered. "This is the mysterious cabin?" my friend asked skeptically. I simply nodded, unable to take my eyes off the remains. A shiver ran down my spine as I thought about what I had seen there. "That's it?" he asked incredulously. "You dragged us all the way out here for this old wreck?" I wanted to respond, but then I noticed it. The sudden drop in temperature, the faint rustling that sounded like whispers passing through the trees. The air felt heavy again. My gaze shifted to the shadows of the ruin, and for a brief moment, I could have sworn I saw someone standing there, a figure in a pale dress, with empty eyes. "Let's go," I muttered finally, grabbing my friend's arm and heading back the way we came. Since then, I've never set foot in that forest again. I sincerely thank you for embarking on this journey into the darkness with me. It has been a great honor to reveal a piece of the unknown to you. Should you wish to continue exploring the secrets of our world, I cordially invite you to subscribe to the channel. That way, you will never again overlook a flickering shadow at the edge of your sight, nor ignore the soft whispers in the dark, waiting patiently to be heard by you. If you wish to make me a most special joy, you will find my Amazon wish list in the description. Each wish you grant fills me with immeasurable delight and gives me the motivation to create even more stories, allowing the light of the midnight lantern to shine ever brighter. It is by no means a necessity, yet every gesture fills my heart with profound gratitude. May the light of the midnight lantern ever guide and protect you, and may the shadows find no hold upon you, until we cross paths once more, when the darkness calls forth again.